All right, how's everybody doing? All right, let's give this man a round of applause. I mean, wow. Wow. We've been talking about this for a couple of years now. And when you see it in real time, when you see how crazy this is, Jim Crow really is coming back in a major way. And I'm so thankful. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here because you give a damn. My friend, I would like you, I know you're not on the panel, but I would like you to at least share with us what the Voting Rights Project is all about, and then we'll get into our panel.
Thank you. And again, let me just say, this is the first stop. This is the launch of a campaign to bring national attention to the issue of Crosscheck and other voter suppression tactics and techniques. It is very important that we take this to the community, to the people, educate and engage. What we hope to get out of this, and again, I'm really pleased to see these are the people who are on the front line doing this, fighting this battle, doing this work every day here in Georgia. And what we want to do is have a discussion about what kind of things can be done legislatively, through litigation, and through mobilization to deal with these issues. So thank you all again.
Thank you. We have a time crunch because of an upcoming press conference, so I will have to be brief. We're good? Excellent. All right, let me begin with Greg. Greg, why did you do this?
Why? Oh my God, no one's ever asked me why. I come, in the longer version of the film, you'll actually see where I grew up. I grew up at the butt end of Los Angeles, literally, where the sewage comes out into the sewage plant. I grew up next to the sewage plant, near the power plant, city dump, mostly Chicano neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And we were supposed to go to Vietnam, and if we came back, work at the Bob's Big Boy or go to the GM plant, which ended up being in Monterrey, Mexico after NAFTA. And I knew this. Me, whether you grew up poor or have the wrong color skin, we were the fodder for their wars. Not only the physical bullet wars with bullets, but the class war. And they knew that we had one weapon to fire back, a ballot. So they were going to do everything that they could to make sure we never got it. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you got it.
Amen to that.
Thank you.
We know that elections and education are great equalizers. And this question is for anyone who wants to grab the microphone. What are actual combat solutions that can eliminate this Jim Crow era of voter suppression? Queen Helen, if you wanted to, that's fine.
Well, what we can do to combat voter suppression, there are lots of techniques that they're using, and I'll start with one that begins with the Voting Rights Act. As you know, and you saw in the film about Shelby decision that really blew up the Voting Rights Act. We have to be vigilant to know what is happening on those boards of elections, because they are the people that make those laws, make the rules. So we have to be engaged in it. We have to monitor what they're doing. What processes are they planning to put in place? We have to know those. We have to become members of those boards of elections so that we can change the makeup of those boards and change people who really believe in access to the ballot. That's just one thing that we can do, Rashad, is be engaged in the process. Once you become a registered voter, become a knowledgeable voter and know who you're voting for, what it means, know what the process is. We had over 400,000 African Americans alone in Georgia who were registered to vote but didn't show up at the polls. That's a voter suppression because you made that step, but you didn't go to really become that final voter. So how do you change that? Again, you have to be educated about who you're voting for, what you're voting for, and what the process entails. I mean, I could go on and on about so many things that are happening here in Georgia. Precinct consolidations, if you look at that. Photo IDs, private colleges, you can't use photo IDs. If you look at exact match, where your name has to match the Social Security database or the driver's license database for Georgia, that's a suppression technique. So we have to be vigilant and know how do we overcome those things. Private colleges are not being a part of a photo ID is a legislative process. So we have to be engaged from not only being a community activist, being at the legislature, fighting back whatever may occur, but we also have to become those people who need to be elected. You need to run for office. Those are some ways that we can combat. I'm just going to name those few, and there are others, and I'll talk about Crosscheck because Georgia has stepped up its engagement in Crosscheck.
Can I just add that in the Shelby County decision decided in 2013, the court only invalidated the coverage formula of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Section 5 required 17 states or parts of states with the worst histories of discrimination to get federal approval before they could implement any change in their voting practices or procedures. The Supreme Court held that that coverage formula was based upon outmoded data, but it did not hold that Section 5 itself was unconstitutional, and it expressly said that Congress could enact a new coverage formula. And indeed, a bill was introduced in 2005, the Voting Rights Act, Advancement Act, which is pending in Congress, but the Republican-controlled House and Senate will never approve of that. But we should not walk away from Section 5. We should demand that Congress re-implement Section 5 because it was not implemented. And then secondly, I will say that there are other provisions of the Voting Rights Act which were not invalidated in any way, and one of them is Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. It is a critically important provision of the Voting Rights Act because it protects the equal right of racial and language minorities to participate, I'm quoting now, to participate in the political process and elect representatives of their choice, end quote. That is still out there. That's a critical statute that we can use to challenge these voter suppression measures. And indeed, there's a lot of litigation going on as we speak now. And I may say that we have seen a couple of very positive decisions in validating voter suppression measures. For example, the court recently invalidated congressional redistricting in North Carolina because it discriminated on the basis of race. And a couple of weeks prior to that, the Supreme Court refused to review a decision of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in which it invalidated a North Carolina law that had like 5 or 6 voter suppression measures, cutting down early days of voting and so on. So it's possible for us to go to court and challenge these measures, and that's what we should do, and we should also insist that Congress do something about Section 5.
I'd say that one of the ways that we've decided to combat voter suppression is by doing large-scale voter registration drives that are focused on people of color. When the New Georgia Project started in 2014, our data showed that there were over 800,000 African Americans, Latinos, and Asian Americans, residents of color in the state of Georgia who were eligible to vote and unregistered. And so to date, we've registered over 200,000 people of color in the state of Georgia, so cutting that number down by 25%. So that's one of the tactics that we've chosen. Now, we have encountered several obstacles in our efforts to register and engage and move people to the polls, but that doesn't stop us.
So one of the things that Common Cause Georgia has been focused on probably for the last 2 years is redistricting. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. Every 10 years we have the census, right? And then they have to go back in the state legislatures and redraw congressional and state level districts. So this may not seem like it's going to connect, but it does. This past legislative session, we had this horrible redistricting bill that actually took 2 House districts, and you could literally see the movement of whites and blacks in and out of these districts. I mean, it was truly, truly egregious. So what did we do? Well, there's only one of me in the state, and believe it or not, I just work part-time. So I had to call upon all of my friends, my allies that are here, their members. We formed a very large coalition where we made hundreds upon hundreds of phone calls into these legislators' offices. And we just asked them, do you agree with gerrymandering? You know, and of course, got dead silence, or no, of course not, or I'll have to call you back. But the effect was we were able, on the last day of the legislative session, to kill the legislation. And the reason that we were able to do so is because we put pressure on these legislators not to do interim redistricting. We said, hey, look, we have a number of groups that are lined up, ready to sue if you do pass these new maps. In addition, we have people in every single one of your districts who are ready to run for office and challenge you. So that proved to be very effective, and I'm a really big supporter and believer in grassroots coalitions and grassroots building. Common Cause is going to be working this summer and fall to go all around the state and educate on redistricting and also our voting machines issues, which I'm hoping we'll talk about those things as well today. But grassroots, when you don't have we don't have the budget, we clearly don't have the manpower with just myself being here in the state and 5 board members, you have to rely on people who are interested in your issue and want to be engaged and want to make a change. And to Nsei's point, partisan politics doesn't seem to really turn a lot of people on nowadays. I wonder why. So this issue-based advocacy is perhaps the best way that we can fight back and defend our democracy. So I just wanted to add that little touch in there.
Hi, I'm Kat Calvin. I'm the founder of Spread the Vote, and we get IDs for voters who don't have them in voter ID states. And as most of you are probably aware, either because you have read up on the laws or because you've had to vote in Georgia, you need a specific type of government-issued ID to vote in the state of Georgia. 21 million people across the country who are eligible voters don't have government-issued photo ID, and we know that 675,000 registered voters in the state of Georgia don't have the ID they need to vote. So what we do is help people get IDs, overcome the challenges of time, transportation, money. I actually was so glad, Greg, that you featured the woman, and I get so sad every time I pass Dr. King's church, who had her little flimsy paper voter ID that took her months to get, because in order to get over the 24th Amendment, because believe it or not, there is a constitutional amendment that bans poll taxes, but we all know that constitutional amendments don't matter anymore because we also have an emoluments clause. And so in order to get past the 24th Amendment, the IDs are free, but the documentation that is required to get these IDs is not only not free, but it's a challenge, and you're exclusively dealing with a population that doesn't have driver's licenses, and these laws are usually paired with the closure of DMVs and license issuing offices in poor and neighborhoods of color, and so it makes it incredibly difficult and sometimes impossible for people to get IDs so they can vote. And so we have been incredibly lucky to partner with organizations like the New Georgia Project, who are registering thousands and thousands of people, many of whom don't have the ID that they actually need to vote. And if you don't have it, you'll go to the polls and you'll get rejected, and then you'll never try to vote again. So if you want a pragmatic solution, go to spreadthevote.org, and you can volunteer with us.
I just want to add one quick thing. Yes, and there's one young woman who told me her story that she spent months trying to get an ID, a student voter who lives here in Georgia. And it was so bad, she called the Democratic Party and they said, "You're a student here in Georgia at a private university, give up, they're not going to let you vote." She took 3 months and she got her vote. That's my daughter.
Throw in, and I've had several people say they're not donating $20 to me because I've said this, but I don't care. I started this after the election. I've spent, how many years has it been since Shelby County v. Holder, waiting for the Democratic Party to do something about this issue, and I lived in DC and actually went to the DNC, and they're not going to do anything, which is why I said, you know, fuck it, I'll do it, because I'm a black woman, and that's what we do. So don't wait for the Democratic Party, do it yourself. Oh my God, this is a church. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry, Pastor Jenkins. I'm so sorry. I forgot this was a church. Oh.
It's okay. The same God inside the church is outside the church. So he's heard it before, I promise you. All right. I want to make sure we get an opportunity to engage you, the audience. So if we have a microphone, if you guys can set that up, we will begin. We'll form a line. I'm reminded of something that happened when I was the political director of the Georgia Democratic Party. I received a phone call from a woman in South Georgia. She had to get an ID. So we're going through the process. But she was born at a time where you didn't really have to have a birth certificate, okay? I called holy hell trying to figure out how we can get a birth certificate when there's none on file. We ended up having to find her pastor, who was really one step away from the grave, to be quite honest, okay? He was able to sign in a Bible that he knows that she was born around this time. And we could use that document. Now, you do know no one knew in Georgia you can use this document, but you legally can. But no one in the administration knew you could do this. So we went through that process, back and forth. We eventually got her an ID so that she could participate. It took myself, my staff of about probably 28 people, 4 months to get this woman an ID, okay? Here's the question. A lot of people use the Constitution as a disguise for their own agenda. There's one school of thought from the conservatives that says you have to have an ID in order to vote because it protects your right. Then from the same conservative ideology, they say, but you don't need to have an ID in order to purchase a weapon because having a gun is a constitutional right. Well, why is it that I need an ID to practice one constitutional right, but I don't need an ID to practice the other?
Richey, can I comment on that?
Sure, yes.
To be very clear, the reason is because these laws are racially and politically motivated. They are designed for the sole purpose of preventing people from voting. Let me also say, I'm going to respond to Kat's comment about the Democratic Party. You know, I'm really glad everyone is here because the reality of the matter is we are the electorate, we are the party, we are the voters, no matter what party you are. It is really our responsibility to deal with these issues. We can't just hand it off to these organizers. We can't hand it off to the people who are already elected in office. Each one of us, and you guys, you're here, so you're way ahead of the game. Let me add, if you registered on Eventbrite for this event, we have your contact information, and the organizations here will get that. If you did not register on Eventbrite, and you want to keep in touch with us and find out how to get more involved with this, please be sure we capture your information before we leave. But I want to make it very clear, and I think Ms. Butler mentioned this too. We got to start holding people accountable who suppress our right to vote. Right now it's done without any consequence. We litigate and we win. The taxpayers pay the fines and fees associated with that. The suppression and the damage has already been done. It takes years later to recover from it. And the people that did it move on with impunity. It's time to impose some consequences, politically and legally. It's our party, and we got to start electing people who are going to support us. And with that, I'd like to introduce this man and let him ask one question.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank everyone for being here today and having this event. This has been awesome. My name is R.J. Hadley. Thank you, thank you. And since January, I am the only declared Democratic candidate for Secretary of State in 2018. We have to hold this party accountable. We have to. And I know these folks from their various organizations believe that as well. As running for Secretary of State, I believe in all of the things that were mentioned here because we have to increase the ability to vote, not decrease the ability to vote, and that seems to be their only reason to exist. My question for the panel is, with this voter fraud commission, the sham, with Kobach now as vice chair, how do you see that's going to play out across the nation?
This is Greg Palast again. Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Just one quick note of information. That guy, Chris Kobach, who runs Crosscheck and does those other things, this is the guy that President Trump has just put in charge of the so-called Election Integrity Commission, which is planning to rewrite the voting laws of the United States. It's like putting Al Capone in charge of investing bank robbery. And so he is in charge with Vice President Pence. So this is another reason that we have to move into action, and I have to keep updating the film.
They're going to go after voting rights groups like the New Georgia Project, and so they're going to go after individuals. I think that they're weaponizing the law. I think that so in 2014, when the New Georgia Project was launched, our first sort of large-scale voter registration effort, we registered 86,419 Georgians, and by election day, only 46,000 of them had made it onto the voter rolls. And so there were 40,000 folks missing, and we went to the Secretary of State, and we went to the counties where those forms, where we submitted those forms and said, where are our people? What actually ended up happening is that they used the 40,000 missing voters as a way to discredit our program, to discredit our canvassers and our effort, and launched a criminal investigation into the organization. There was a woman featured in the film, Helen Kim Ho, who ran an organization. At the time, it was called the Asian American Legal Advocacy Center, and they had this 10,000 Koreans campaign because the number of Korean Americans that were becoming citizens in and around Gwinnett County had grown, and they wanted to make sure that there was representation. So they launched a large-scale effort to register 10,000 Koreans, and the Secretary of State and the investigators, from the Attorney General's office, the GBI, came into the door, seized all their files, seized their computers, and then launched an investigation. They had an investigative cloud hanging over the organization for a number of years, and then one day, 3 years later, they just quietly dropped the charges. But by then, they had shifted the focus of the organization to move away from voter registration and civic engagement, or they started to adopt different tactics, and so it had a chilling effect, right? People didn't want to engage in this kind of work because of the liability that was associated with it. And so things like this are happening already in Georgia, in Indiana. Right before the 2016 elections, the Secretary of State's folks came in, voter registration office, kicked in the door, seized all the files, took everything, and the canvassers, like, these are kids making, $15 an hour, standing on college campuses and street corners registering people with clipboards that like now have to scramble to find attorneys because they are under investigation by their state. And so when I think about the commission, I think that it's going to be nationalized and they're going to weaponize the secretaries of states across the country against voting rights advocates and people just trying to participate in our democracy.
And to that point, Indiana and Wisconsin have some of the most suppressive laws on the books, and that's Pence and that's Ryan. So they are going to try to nationalize voter suppression, and they're probably also going to come up with some sort of equal rights excuse to repeal the 19th Amendment because they hate women as much as they hate people voting.
Helen Butler.
Well, I just wanted to say, and they've already said of what I think about the Election Integrity Commission, but I do want to say, go back to the photo ID, is that there are rules that we need to know about the laws, specifically in Georgia, that will allow people to assume and get their IDs very easily. One part is if you're already registered to vote, if you didn't have an ID before, because 200 years we voted without an ID, but in 2001 we decided we needed ID. But if you were registered before that time, all you have to do is go inside your Board of Elections and tell them I'm registered, pull my voter registration application. They're required to give you a free photo ID. So you don't have to expand and go look for your birth certificate or any of those other things.
Is that process immediate, Helen, when they do
That's
that?
immediate. That's
Okay.
immediate. So we need to know the rules that will allow you to get it as well as to know which barriers are there. But that is a rule that will allow you to get a photo ID very easily. If you have been registered before that time, all you do is ask them to pull your voter registration application. You want a free photo ID, which they're required to give you in your local Board of Elections so you can get that ID. So we need to know the rules that can allow you to obtain those things without any problem. So that is a part of the law. Even though Georgia had said it had a glow bus and it was taking people all around to different parts of the state to give them free photo IDs, that wasn't the case. But we want to make sure that people who can get it without barriers do so, because that is one rule. If you're already registered to vote before 2001, you can just pull your registration application and they can give you a free photo ID. Of course, you may have to pay out in, I guess, Hancock County or somewhere that doesn't have modern transportation. You may have to pay somebody to take you there to get it.
Can I just do a quick historic footnote? In a sense, we're not seeing anything going on today that's new, because when the country was founded, it was not on principles of democracy, but principles of aristocracy, because the only people who could vote were white, male property owners over the age of 21. Blacks didn't get the right to vote until after the Civil War and passage of the 15th Amendment, but after Reconstruction, the white South took away the right of blacks to vote through a variety, a litany test of measures. Things like poll taxes, literacy tests, good character tests, residency requirements, all white primaries, disfranchising offenses, property ownership requirements, abolishing locally elected offices, and of course fraud, and the list goes on and on and on. And women didn't get the right to vote until passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920. I think there was one state that gave women the right to vote, Montana, but otherwise women did not get the right to vote. And that's hard to believe. And we know that American Indians did not get a general federally protected right to vote until passage of the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. And 18-year-olds didn't get the right to vote until passage of the 26th Amendment in 1971. Onerous durational residency requirements for voting were not struck down until 1972. It was not until 1975 that the Supreme Court ruled ownership of property could not be required for voting in local elections. So, we have such an incredible history of suppressing the right to vote, denying people the right to vote, and we're going through all this again, and we have to stand up for it, which we all are doing here, and I think that's terrific. And we know that we can bring lawsuits, and if we win those lawsuits, we get not only costs and fees, but the Supreme Court has also held that if you're denied the right to vote and you show a violation of a constitutional or Voting Rights Act violation, you can recover, damages. And there have been a couple of cases.
Counselor, let's keep it moving so we can get some other people to add to that. I mean, that's very important, but I do want to get to some of the questions
but you
here.
can get money damages if your voting rights are violated. That's the thing to keep in mind.
That warms my heart. I always like to hear damages. First is a comment about Secretary of State Brian Kemp. If you're a registered voter in Georgia, like myself, you've had your privacy violated twice, and he's paid no penalty for that. He needs to be out of office. I bring you greetings from the 5th District. John Lewis is my congressman. I want to let everybody know in the 6th that early voting starts Tuesday, and there is a lawsuit going on right now asking for paper ballots. I don't know who's brought the lawsuit, but I think that would be advisable. And please, if you're in the 6th, get your friends out.
We have another audience question.
Good afternoon. My name is Beatrice Williams. I'm in the 4th Congressional District, which is Hank Johnson's district. I live in the new city of Stonecrest, Georgia. I work with Helen a lot, so I know when Helen says something, you can take it to the bank. So the other thing I want to, we don't need to fund Trump's idea of suppressing our vote. All we have to do is rise up from the bottom and call them and just jam all the lines, the fax line, the telephone line, and tell them not to fund it. If they can cut out feeding the hungry, cut out money for children, SNAP, and all that, we have to cut out this stuff for funding things that persecute us. We can't vote. If we lose our power and right to vote, we have nothing left. So we're going to fight this with all our hearts, mind, and soul. It's just not going to happen. Not on my watch.
We have another question from the audience.
Yes, please. My name is Katie Hubner. I'm a member of the 6th District. I hope John Ossoff wins. I have a concern. Back in 2000, there was back in 2000, there was a man named Athan Gibbs. I don't know whether you're familiar with that name, perhaps, Mr. Palast, A-T-H-A-N-G-I-B-B-S. He spent his life as an accountant in Tennessee. He was an African American who was absolutely appalled by the 2000 election results. So he gathered together a team and he invented a voting machine called TrueVote, T-R-U-V-O-T-E. That machine was designed so that when a voter went to vote electronically, you would get a printout of your vote, and then you could go home, you had a number on that ballot, and you could check that your vote was placed on the internet and counted. We have no voting system like that. Every time I vote in the polls, I think I've lost because the vote has been stolen. You have all suggested very good ideas here to get the grassroots out going and that sort of thing. But how are we going to change it when we have in Georgia a 2,000-year-old Windows system that isn't even industrial strength, that's probably been hacked many times, that you can upload code to it and change it either remotely or on site? How are we ever going to get to win some of these issues if our vote isn't going to be counted because it's stolen electronically?
Anybody who wants to grab that?
Well, one way is, of course, to use the absentee balloting process, which gives you a paper trail. I know a lot of people are afraid of using absentee ballot because they have been misused, but that is one way of doing it. In fact, I work with Reverend Jasper Williams, and his church actually did an absentee balloting process. They called it 99 and a half won't do, which is an old Negro spiritual, really. Saying they were trying to make 100. He had that as a project in his church where everyone was required first to do voter registration every Sunday after church to get everyone registered to vote. Then everybody filled out a voter registration application. They faxed it in, they got their ballots back, and then they named one Sunday before Election Day to actually vote absentee. They placed their ballots in a mail bin that the mail person came and picked up. So they marched to the, had a Souls to the Poll activity that actually was absentee voting. A lot of people are afraid of doing that because there have been problems with stuff in the ballot. But again, if we're vigilant, every candidate, every political party, and even non-candidates can have poll monitors to observe the process. Absentee voting doesn't require photo ID, by the way. Absentee voting is 45 days before any election. Any in-person voting is 21 days. All of it used to be 45 days, but it was changed because in 2008, we wrapped around buildings to make sure we got to vote. So they reduced the number of early voting days from 45 to 21 days. So that was done with a purpose. So if I vote by absentee, and certain people do that right now, and they don't look like me because we don't trust absentee voting. But absentee voting is a way that you can really have a physical document that will count. The True to Vote, I know about that voting machine. Our machine has a paper ballot, a paper trail, but it's a cumulative, it's a cumulative paper trail within the voting machine. There's no way to tell individually how to track that. So absentee voting is the only way you can do it at this point in terms of auditing the vote. So absentee voting is a process, again, if we're vigilant, we can be there to see the counting, and you are allowed to be there as observers if you're a candidate's poll watcher or if you're a political party poll watcher. And as we, as non-partisan organizations, we have what you call election protection monitors that can be there 45 days prior to. You can actually see what happens when those ballots come into the election offices and see what the process is. They're supposed to be on the lock and key, and you can actually see that that happens. But we have to become engaged to do that.
Really quick question. What happens if a monitor sees something funky? What are they supposed to do?
If they're one of our monitors, we have a toll-free number that they call where we have lawyers on duty, pro bono lawyers. That means free lawyers that will actually come and help and assist with any problem that we find that is happening to a voter out at the precincts.
Are they able to document, take pictures?
We document, we take pictures, we actually fill out incident reports, we do all of that, and we keep track of that. So in the 6th Congressional District, we'll be doing election protection activities, which mean we'll have people at the precincts that if you see them encounter a problem, we'll have on black t-shirts with white lettering that says election protection, and they will be there to assist any voter. In fact, they can actually go inside with the voter to assist that voter if they need that help. So we will have people there to actually monitor what's going on.
I just want to say that your question sort of highlights the importance of voting all the way down the ballot, and why just like the top of the ticket race, like there was so much attention being paid to the presidential election, and that's really important. But the Secretary of State, as the sort of chief elections officer for the state of Georgia, the CEO of Elections Incorporated, if you will, his work is really, really, really important. Local elections matter, so I'm really happy to hear about the energy and the enthusiasm for the special election. I would say that one of the other things that can be done, so voting for other offices and putting energy and attention and talking to your friends and family and neighbors about the other constitutional offices. But there's the state legislature. They're the ones who are unwilling to provide the resources and provide the fire and the gas in order to accelerate the changes that we need, right? So they're people, so you know, there's not a lot of money and not a lot of attention that's going to these state Senate candidates and these state representatives, but they sit on the committees. They're the ones who make the rules. You know, I remember, it's so funny, I was driving here, you passed by Mimosa Elementary School. It's right next to this church. And a week before the election, there was an AJC report that says that there was lead in the drinking water, in the fountains, and in the sinks in Mimosa Elementary School, and there were 10 schools in Fulton County where they found lead, like inappropriate. I don't know what the appropriate level of lead is, but
Zero.
right.
There's no appropriate
There's
level
no
for lead.
appropriate, right. But like extraordinary amounts of lead in the water, and so a lot of attention, national attention is being given to Flint, but we have our own Flint, Michigans, like here in Georgia, and we have state representatives and state senators who have the ability to do something about it, but there are no laws in Georgia that require the water in schools to be tested, and there are no laws in Georgia that once the water has been, once there's contaminants identified in the water, that they're required to remedy it. So, you have to vote, and it has to be more than the top of the ticket races, and you have to run for office, and we can't like allow ourselves to disengage, because I know sometimes it can just be a lot. It's just a lot, but you know, we can't. We have to sort of keep ourselves encouraged, you know, take the time that you need to get well so that you can keep going, but remain vigilant and hold these people accountable. I would say the other thing is, they raise the alarm. We have to, the drumbeat. Like, it comes from your Facebook posts and you talking to other people, but we've been saying this for a long time. Ms. Butler's been saying this for a long time. And again, I told someone earlier, hi Joe, that I'm a little concerned because sometimes I feel like I'm a person wearing the tinfoil hat. Like something in the milk isn't clean, y'all, right? Like there are concerns about the integrity of our elections, and we absolutely have to do something about it. And I know that, it begs the larger question about, well, do we question every race? And, how do we fix it? And is the problem too large? But we have to tackle this. We absolutely have to tackle this. Our machines are running on Windows 2000. Microsoft no longer provides the support for that. Election machines get stolen out of election workers' cars. The weekend before a major election, we're headed into a really important runoff. And again, the paper trail. There isn't a paper trail that's going to satisfy an individual voter that their vote was collected and their vote counted, and we have to do something about it.
We have another call. We have another.
Yes.
I think I'm on radio.
Another call.
We have another audience member.
I'm also on radio, so I could appreciate that.
You get it.
Anyway, my
Thank
name
you.
is Heather Gray, and I'm with WRG Radio. I just have a brief question. First of all, I'm wanting to thank you all so much for your great work. And I need to say that within the midst, actually, we have one of the most incredible national people who's involved in protecting voting rights, and that's Laughlin McDonald at the ACLU. I mean, Laughlin has been the one who's kept the extension of the Voting Rights Act going all these many years. He's just remarkable and so incredibly knowledgeable. So I do have a question for you, Laughlin. You were talking about lawsuits. So I was sitting in the back of the room here thinking, can there not be a huge class action lawsuit filed against the government due to the fact that these thousands of people have been taken off the voting rolls? Is that possible? That's my question to you.
Yeah, well, you can bring a class action lawsuit, but most of the laws, well, you bring a lawsuit, the first thing you want is a law from the court, an order from the court saying that the challenge practice can no longer be enforced. Then you can recover your costs and fees, but you can also recover damages for individual people. But you can bring a class action lawsuit and probably get a far greater range of remedies from the court. So I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question, but the litigation is an important thing, and it can work. I mean, but it's been my experience that, you bring these lawsuits, you challenge their county's use of at-large elections, you win, you get fees, you get an injunction from the court, then you sue another county which has the same facts. Many of those counties would settle those lawsuits. So You know, we've settled a lot of lawsuits because of all the remedies that are available through litigation. So litigation can be time consuming and it can be expensive, but you can be compensated, and it does have a positive impact in getting jurisdictions to abandon these devices that either do discriminate or keeps them from enacting ones that might discriminate. So I'm not sure if that's Heather is a very good positive answer to your question, but that's the best I can do.
The question I have for the panel is, I happen to be a resident of the 6th District. The former Secretary of State Karen Handel, who is running against the Democratic candidate John Ossoff, when she was Secretary of State, she purged over 50,000 votes from the voter list. She also purged over 4,000 recently made citizens of Georgia. Now, Helen Butler has been very effective going to every induction of new citizens, signing up these people. Those people are more patriotic than I am. They are eager to participate in the process. But Karen Handel took them off the rolls. In both instances, the courts overturned her dastardly behavior. Why is this issue not being raised in the campaigns of the history of voter fraud committed by our former Secretary of State?
Yeah, I think that's a great question for the campaign. I believe that's a remarkable question for messaging of that campaign. Does anyone here work with John Ossoff's campaign? I know we all know him. All right, well, I'm sure this will get back to him. I sent him a text message. All right, we have another question.
My name is Walter White, and I think the important aspect of this election is that the results be trusted. I keep hearing the things about the voting machines, and what I'd like to see is specific numbers. If we just took the 6th District with $30 million coming into it, from both sides, this is a nonpartisan issue, I think. Either side that wins is going to say that there's been hacking. And even though, you know, there has to be equal protection, so we've got a vote starting the 30th. It's too soon to do much of anything. You could probably force paper votes by the 30th, you know, and have a trail, a different way of going. But but the lawsuit we got till Wednesday. And what I'd like to see is specific numbers. Questions are, is there a machine that we want? Is there a machine that works better? How much does it cost? And how many polling places are in the 6th District? I realize this has to be a statewide deal, but we might set a national example by saying, you know, these people have got millions to spend, and it would help both sides to say, you know, the figure is 1.6 million, let's just do it. Is there an answer to the number, the dollar figure?
So we've already spoken to Common Cause. Georgia has already spoken to several of the boards of elections to try to get them, encourage them to use paper trails. So at least we have an auditable system, especially in light of the mayhem that happened during the special itself. They all contend, and we know this to be fact, that this is a Secretary of State decision. They absolutely cannot do anything about it. I mean, we've tried to look at the laws, we've tried to look at their local governments to see any wiggle room. There really is none. It is a state. No, absolutely not. That is a not, so a political party contributing money to buy voting machines would be really not a good, probably, thing. Sure. Equal, right. No, it would have to come from the state legislature. They would have to, you know, earmark the money for the Secretary of State to go out and again, that's why it's going to take 4 to 5 years. You've got to do the research, right? You've got to, you know, go meet with the companies, whatever it entails. Right. I mean, there's so many steps to it. Common Cause has hand-delivered letters to the Attorney General, State's Attorney General, Brian Kemp's office, all the leadership down at the Capitol, requesting in lieu of litigation, basically, because we are going to probably end up litigating on this, to say, hey, we're giving you the opportunity to make things right. You know, pass a budget, at least have the paper trail, but let's look at this in the 2018 session. How can we remedy this situation? Kemp's office says it's too expensive to produce paper trail in these voting machines, which we know to be false. They can do it very easily in any machine in any county across the state. But he contends, he literally said to us, well, why we're trying to move forward and progress, why do we want to go back to a paper ballot? And, you know, I said, well, we want to do that because we can't trust our voting machines completely because we don't have any way to audit them. I mean, and that's a huge, huge problem. Most states have a paper trail that they can audit the whole election process. You know, if someone down in Butts County says, hey, my vote didn't get counted, boom, they can spit out the paper trail, there you have it. But he is absolutely refusing, and as most of you know, he's running for governor next year. So he is completely just in the governor's mindset, not even thinking about his duties as Secretary of State. So, you know, it's going to take an effort of everyone across the state who cares about democracy to be hounding these state legislators to do something about it. I mean, that's absolutely what it's going to take. DeKalb County Board of Elections, Cobb County, any county here in the 6th District, I'm sure that they want to do stuff to help, but they can't because they're basically hands tied behind their back for the Secretary of State's office. So,
isn't it amazing how we don't have money to take care of people here, but we have unlimited money to kill people and blow things up overseas, right? The too expensive argument is something that is used not only for expanding the voter base, making sure people have access to the ballots, but it's also used to take care of people. We don't have enough money for Meals on Wheels, et cetera. I'm already flat out of time. Madam, we're going to take your question, and I would like to create an opportunity afterwards where you guys can associate here with us. All right, you can stay a little while. Thank you. All right, go ahead, ma'am.
My name is Minnie Ruffin, and I understand between 2012 and 2014, Georgia purged 872,000 voters from the voter files. And I understand Common Cause and NAACP filed a suit against the Secretary of State. I'd like to know what's the result of that suit.
I will have to get back to you on that. I know that was something Emmett Bondurant, who's been a big civil rights, voting rights attorney for many, many years. He just turned 80. Such a wonderful guy. He is actually the person that I need to talk to ask him for an update on that. I'm not sure.
All right, so we got my good friend, Attorney Gerald Griggs. Let's give him a round of applause. Brother is on the front line all the time.
So that lawsuit was actually settled, and the Secretary of State was forced to put about 46,000 names back on the rolls. Of course, I'm Attorney Gerald Griggs with the Georgia NAACP, and we've also sued him again. So, you know, we're in the business of suing the Secretary of State and making sure we hold him accountable. But I love the work that everyone on the panel is doing. I send regards from Reverend Dr. Francis Johnson, who could not be here, but he sends his regards. And we will continue to keep the fight going to Secretary of State Brian Kemp. Again, we were part of the coalition that sued to reopen voter registration for the 6th District race. So just know that the power of the people and advocacy is working in Georgia. We are very vigilant. And what I would ask, as opposed to continuing to do this work, you guys need to join an organization. You need to be a part of the resistance. I see my sister from another mother, Wanda Mosley, in the audience. You guys need to hold your political representatives accountable, and that means going to their office. That means calling them. That means showing up at town halls. That means making sure that you hold a town hall and make them come. That means emails, and that means every single thing you can possibly do, because trust me, they are listening. It's one thing to email. It's another thing to come down to the Gold Dome, go over to the Coverdale Legislative Building and sit down there and have a meeting. because if 3 or 4 people call, they believe something's wrong. If 3 or 4 people show up, they definitely know something's wrong. So we need to continue to do that. Make sure that you guys are registered to vote. Vote in every election all the way down the ballot. Vote one time, of course. But vote all the way down the ballot, and make sure you hold the politicians accountable, because we are in a new political climate. The resistance is strong. I send hello from the resistance. We are very strong. The reason the resistance is strong is because of you, so please become active, elevate your voice, vote, and hold the elected officials accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald.
I just want to say something quickly about litigation. Litigation is just one approach and one prong sort of in the whole strategy. So, you know, a lot of people call my office, say, is Common Cause going to sue about blah, 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 blah. Well, I mean, potentially, right? But we would like to see activism happen first and a grassroots mobilization effort happen first. Litigation is one part of our strategy that we use, but it's not the sole aim and sole focus of our organization. So just kind of keep that in mind. I mean, we need people. We need you all to help us in order to get this stuff done. I mean, poor Emmett, he's worked so many pro bono hours, I'm not even sure he's paying himself anymore for all these lawsuits. And the idea is, you know, that all of these strategies work in tandem rather than just in separate silos.
I could not agree more. You can't register 215,000 African American and Latinos in a place like Georgia without having a solid sort of public relations press strategy, storytelling strategy, right? Without really, really good lawyers who will answer your call in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day when, you know, sheriff deputies in some small town in Georgia are trying to snatch your canvassers off the street because they're being accused of casing houses, as opposed to registering people to vote. And so it's so every campaign that we take requires a litigation strategy or a legal strategy to protect the work, right? The actual work of organizing people themselves, talking to folks, but also storytelling and press, and making sure that people know the truth about what's happening, and that these are real things. So it's not just you know, an academic exercise about like how we need to get more people of color to vote, and the voting laws in Georgia are antiquated. Like they have a real impact on our lives. The people who are in office, elected officials, you know, they have real responsibilities. We need to actually hold them accountable, and we need to make sure that we're telling stories about them. So it's organizing, it's public relations and press, and it's also the legal strategy.
It's also funding. And that's something that's really important.
That's the thread.
People are always like too polite to say, but like some of us are either doing this full time, and so whether or not we eat depends on whether or not we get donations, and some of us are doing it part time and could be doing it full time. And it's, yeah, we really, really need people to volunteer and to spread the word and to other things, but we also need people to donate $20 a month, because without money, I have to go back to being a lawyer in LA, which is a fantastic life, but it's not the work that's going to get people IDs. And I'm here because I want to be able to do this, but it takes funding. And personally, I'm not too polite to ask because I like food like so much. And it also, IDs in Georgia aren't free for a lot of people, and we can't do that without funding. And Common Cause really needs money, and New Georgia Pride really needs money, and everybody really needs money. So I'm going to be the one to say it. It also takes funding.
Let's give our panel a round of applause. They are so wonderful. All right, guys, and with that concludes our panel.